Hello, this is Mark Smith with Family Tree Counseling Associates, and I'm continuing my study of respect. This week's video is called Respect in Marriage Can Spoil Like Milk. I have another definition for respect taken from Google, and that is a feeling of deep admiration for someone or something elicited by their abilities, their qualities, or their achievements. I'll read that again. A feeling of deep admiration for someone or something elicited by their abilities, their qualities, or their achievements. So, in the beginning, in young love, in the early stages of romance, there's a lot of deep admiration going on. You're just dazzled by this amazing person's abilities and their qualities, and you think the coolest person on the planet has picked you. And during the first 7 to 10 years, as a young person, when you fall in love, you're sort of given some grace years where love is easy. It's filled with a lot of magic chemistry. It doesn't require a lot of maintenance. And it gives you, as a couple, the illusion that you're a lot safer and a lot healthier than you really are. And right about then, year 7 to 10 is when the milk begins to spoil. So I'm going to be talking about a particular type of marriage. It's probably the most common type of marriage in our culture, and that is between a counterdependent man and a codependent woman. A counterdependent man is someone who is highly opinionated. It's very hard to move them off of their positions. They're leaders. They are good at casting vision. They make good executives. They're highly independent. They work hard. They do tend to be oblivious and self-absorbed, and they do tend to be workaholics. If not workaholics, then other thingaholics, alcoholics or sex addicts or food addiction or prescription drugs, something. And then the last thing is they tend to have high needs for control. So that's a counterdependent. And in our culture, men we're actually trained to be counterdependent. We're trained to be confident, thick-skinned, independent, and in control of any situation, be able to grab a hold of a situation like a man, you know. Whereas a codependent is someone who is more insecure. They are more dependent emotionally in the beginning of the relationship, and they can be dependent financially for the entirety of the relationship. They are way too other-centered and selfless, and they're way too passive. So you can see how this couple gets together, because he's a leader looking for a follower, and she's a follower looking for a leader. So the counterdependent is really driven by things that they have financial fears. They don't feel good enough, so they're trying to prove to everybody that they are good enough. They need attention. They want power. They want material things. They want some trophies. They need to win. They need acceptance. And they'll tell you, all this work that I'm doing it for my family. But the truth is, you're doing it for your family, and you're doing it to try to prove that you're cool and you're good and you're acceptable and that you're powerful and that you're a man. So he's really laser focused on work and whatever helps him to recharge his batteries so that he can go back to battle. So it might be work and golf, work and hunting. In my case, it's work and playing basketball and writing. But he's in a little bubble of self-absorption, and she can't reach him because she just doesn't speak his language. His language isn't sort of a low-grade nagging. He's never going to hear that. His language is sort of like a baseball bat to the skull. That's what he gets. So the codependent wife, the wife without much voice or power or sense of entitlement, begins to build really thick walls of resentment about he's not helping with the kids, he doesn't help with the household chores. She feels emotionally abandoned because he spent, by the time he gets home, they don't talk. And then he has the audacity at 11:30 at night to demand sex. And they haven't talked for weeks. And that doesn't really work for her. She doesn't feel heard. She doesn't feel respected. And then the tragic thing is she comes to the erroneous conclusion that he, and he alone, is responsible for her unhappiness. When she fell in love with him, she saw him as confident and manly and sensitive and hardworking, an ambitious young man who's going to be a good provider for the family. But now she sees him as an arrogant, self-centered, workaholic jerk. She's lost respect for him for two reasons, and this is very important. Number one, she's lost respect for him because he's hurt her feelings by being insensitive and self-absorbed and abandoning and disrespectful and just a flawed man, as we all are. But the second reason, probably the bigger reason why she's lost respect for him, is that she's settled into victim mentality. And she doesn't own her own responsibility for her own life, but rather scapegoats him as being the bad guy. And victim mentality is the number one killer of marriages. It's also the number 2, the number 3, the number 4, the number 5, the number 6, the number 7, and on killer of marriages. That's why marriages end, as one person sees themselves as being treated unfairly and as having been victimized, while the other person is given the role of the bad guy. He then feels abandoned, and he does feel disrespected. It's within a man to want to be respected. It's just hard to command respect in a relationship over many, many years, because the other person becomes keenly aware of all your flaws. So he feels disrespected and abandoned, and he's very interested in getting his own needs met. And near the top of the list for most men is his sexual needs. And she's not interested. Her body and her heart has shut down because she doesn't feel loved. She scowls at him instead of looks adoringly at him. She doesn't laugh at his jokes anymore. You're in trouble if they don't laugh at your jokes anymore. And there's just an air of contempt and disgust hanging in the air. The milk has not only gone sour, it's congealed into a gross, solid state that makes you want to gag. Did you ever sniff something and it's all you can do to keep from throwing up? That's what a sense of victimization and contempt can lead to. So he also, most counterdependents, have a lot of shame. And shame is oversensitivity to being criticized. And all of a sudden, she's got a whole lot of criticism. So she's pouring gasoline on a fire, because he's not getting his sexual needs met, and he doesn't understand why. He doesn't cheat, and he brings home a good paycheck, and he doesn't beat her. What else do I need to do here, kind of thing he's thinking. And then she's pouring gasoline on the fire of his shame or defensiveness, and it's pretty highly combustible. So And then if you add to that, that he ultimately then does betray her sexually, then that combustible combination of wounds can go nuclear. I mean, it can get very, very ugly. So I am not suggesting that every codependent has to sour due to the counterdependent and his misdeeds and his many marital sins. As she gets into recovery for herself and builds a voice and a power and gets fire in her belly and learns how to take care of herself, her temptation to villainize him will go away. And she won't blame him, but she'll retain her love and respect for him as he is forced to change and grow due to her newfound power, assertiveness, her boundaries that have effective consequences, and her insight. A codependent with victim thinking, their pain is like a swamp. Can you picture it? You know, mosquitoes everywhere, it's hot, moss everywhere, the water's green, it stinks. That's what the pain is represented when you're a victim. Nothing is moving, and it's stagnant, and it's sour. Recovery is like a brisk mountain stream like you'd see in those old Coors Light commercials. And it's just a bubbling brook, icy and fresh and clean. That's what happens when a codependent feels their pain and processes their pain and fixes themselves instead of busying themselves being attacking of their man, their counterdependent. So the number one order of business with this couple is to shift her away from the cancer of victim thinking. When that happens, the entire mood changes. It goes from adversaries to therapy buddies. I've seen it happen in 10 minutes. I've seen it many times happen over the course of one session. It's a beautiful thing to have a codependent realize, oh, he's not the devil himself. He's Mother Nature's tool to make me, really become powerful and develop my sense of self. Cool. The number two order of business is to get the counterdependent in recovery by very respectfully but forcefully teaching them about their own childhood wounds, about their shame or their oversensitivity to criticism, about any addiction that they might have, and how they've hurt their wife so many times and in so many ways, thus producing, the goal is a humble, teachable, non-reactive fellow who's really aware and really remorseful. And that fellow is well on his way to re-earning the type of respect that he once had and the type of respect that he wants to have from his wife. Integrity is one of my favorite words, and now respect is my favorite word. And when you act with integrity and accountability, then you can have respect in your own home, and that is a beautiful thing. So, husbands, if you ain't feeling the love, you better be alarmed, because there might come a day when she'll take all that combustion and seething rage and hatred down to some man-hating attorney's office and plot your demise. I was conducting business. I was looking for an office, a new office several years ago, and one of the agents there shook my hand and said, "Mark, I'm really glad I don't need your services because I'm happily married." And he was one of these fellows that the marriage had spoiled like milk, but he wasn't informed. And he went home that very night within an hour and a half of shaking my hand, and he was informed by his disillusioned and then really highly disrespecting wife that the marriage was over and he needed an attorney because they were going to get divorced. Being aware of your wife's pain is very important. I've been working with a couple where, due to codependency, a fellow hasn't been protecting his wife, and they get locked in verbal battles. And what I've been able to observe and encourage is to see past the wife's victimhood and just to see their raw little girl abandonment pain, and that'll melt your heart. That won't make you defensive. It'll make you remorseful, and it'll make you humble, and it'll make you want to really pay attention and listen. So do that. Listen. Don't be defensive. Bring her to a therapist who espouses that kind of non-victim paradigm, and that's discussed, in this video and in all of our materials. Kathy Henry has a new blog and video out that says, "Who are you in Victimville?" And some of these women are the mayor of Victimville. So get the swamp converted into a fresh, clean, bubbling mountain stream. And do not let that disrespect fester, because that will end badly for you. She could get involved with somebody else. You don't think she could, but she could if you abandon her for long enough. And if you don't hear her for long enough, somebody else might hear her. So don't allow yourself, men, to be placed in an emasculated role. Counterdependents work their way into this sour milk marriage, and all of a sudden they're in the role of the bad guy, the jerk, the idiot who's always getting lectures, and all of a sudden you're not the man in your own home. But with great humility and with piercing insight and with the backup of a therapist who can pluck out that victim mentality. I say your heart's like a garden and victim mentality is like a fast-growing weed. You have to get a therapist in there that plucks it out, even if it's grown as big as an oak tree. We got to uproot it by its roots. It's very important, and it's probably not something you can do with her. You can stand up for yourself. You can set boundaries. You can be non-reactive. You can point out the problem, but then you need to get to therapy and do your own work and create an environment where she can do her work. So get the cancer out. Build codependence. Build yourself into a powerhouse of respectful, pleasant, but highly effective boundary-setting energy. And arrange your life to be happy and whole. And then declare war on your husband's obliviousness, his addictions, his arrogance, with the help of a very insightful and courageous therapist who eats counterdependence for breakfast. I like working with men. I like working with counterdependents, but there does have to be some walls down. If they come in fully arrogant and fully defensive, they're going to hear a lot of truth, but I'm probably going to chase them from the building. So a lot is incumbent upon the codependent getting strong enough to fight the good fight. What you don't want to do, folks, is walk away from the pain and the misery of this reactive, disrespectful spouse without learning your major contributions that led to your situation. Because if you're in this situation where you're being disrespected, that's your issue. You picked someone who you could piss off to the point of low grade, high grade, whatever the case may be, disrespect, and then you've allowed that to happen and you put up with it. And what's going to happen if you do walk away is you're just going to marry a clone, the exact psychological clone of the first spouse, except this time around you're not going to get 7 to 10 years of enmeshment. You'll get 2 to 3 if you're lucky. And this time around, you're going to have half your money, if you're lucky. And this time around, you're only going to have your kids half the time, if you're lucky. And this time around, you're going to have 2 or 3 stepkids around who are angry at you and don't like you, and they're there to muck things up. So that's a challenge. I can't recommend that. You know, fix the one you got, because it's really not about the other person. It's about what have you contributed to this situation. So again, respect, fight for it. And be very alarmed in any relationship that you have where there's not respect, because there's a problem and it's festering and it's going to blow up in your face eventually if you don't fix it. So fix it. Pay attention and listen and have some urgency, because relationships can blow up very quickly if they're left to fester for very long. So thank you for watching today. If you haven't joined our channel, join our channel at Family Tree Counseling on YouTube. And also my books are available at our website, familytreecounseling.com. So keep that milk fresh and do your work. God bless.